Mr. Diaz. How you doing? I hope that you're doing good today. I know, you're a busy guy, right? Which, for me, if you're looking up to your idols and your heroes, and I know you're not supposed to idolize anyone, but if you really respect the work that they've done and like their accomplishments, their thoughts, their presence, the energy you put into your work and the world, then like it's hard not to. It's hard not to want to like make the best use of your time possible to the point where it stops being helpful. Where if I think of something and I'm like, that was good. I got it, but I'm like, I want to make it better. To like fall into perfectionism, right? Um, which is probably like what I'm doing right now. But I'm just trying to get the ball rolling. So I was thinking about like one thing and another thing, and I'm like, I'll just say that instead of trying to make like this epic like 3 hour presentation, right? Which is even something that I can usually do if I just get started and like, hey, there's a starting point, and just to like take a train of thought because I've spent so much time like with the material, with the things that I love, with the things that I've learned, and then just like spending time in that like conceptual space of like visualization and fitting things together in new ways. So you're like, analyzing things and projecting onto them sometimes, maybe. But then you can like create new compositions of ideas in your head. So I'm always turning the puzzle box of life in my mind, like every day. Um, I try and spend some time in thought space or deliberation. And I'm usually trying to think of something like project related or something productive. Of course, there's all aspects of life, and you want to give time and space to everything, like your personal relationships, the energy you put into the world, and like what you want to do. But like comics, games, arts production type stuff, and also thinking about how ways like social systems could work even better than they do now. Like, how do we get the best education possible and the best use of our time? Because that is so much time. Like, you reframe the education of the world, and everything changes. If we get kids in a space of like the work that they do matters, right? And their involvement matters as well. And I've got like a few TED Talks. I've got quite a few TED Talks. I can give my presentation on the whole like where the ideas came from, because it's just like looking into the field. Like, obviously, it could be done better. We could have a lot more resources that we don't have with the, with the tools, the utility, the resources that we do have in terms of technology, communication, and design. Uh, no, sorry, I should probably just like, do a more free form thing, because already there's a pressure. There's like a pressure, and I start thinking like, this won't work, or like I should make it better, and just to like spend an endless time in that space, because there's always things that you don't know. There's ways that you can be smoother or smarter, or and then you just like get lost on a tangent of information, thinking about everything that you don't know, and like analysis paralysis. No, I've been here for like years. Where I was like, the comic book production and design thing, which I'm like, how do you get more creative resources and tools out to people? How do you network those creative resources and educational materials, and how to make the best stories, how to do the best design, to get a good rhythm and flow in your life and into your work, so that you can make the highest amount of progress possible with your time, right? So like a series of courses, not a one size fits all model, but these are things that work for these people. What is your personality? What are your interests? So you can fine tailor an education to you, right? I think specifically in the arts, but you can use that as an example of doing education for anything. But you tailor fit your curriculum to your needs, your specificity, what interests you, and what your passion is. So you can be using that motivation and that excitement to learn as an energy current, and how to run that in the best ways possible to get like an inspired state, like state-based learning, where there's like additive gains on learning, like doing things a little bit more effectively, or like state gains, which is like a multiplicative gains. If you're in a space of inspiration, if you're in a space of like, you're doing your best that day. You are fired up, you have all the skills that you already have, but you're using them at a much higher level. And it brings you into present moment awareness, right? It brings an emotional resonance to the material. So your like retention is way better. Your long form retention is way better. Um, so it's like, you learn to teach or teach to learn. Uh, and that's something I think about, because there's all these great like arts tutorials and stuff, but there's very few like big ass courses or curriculum that takes the individual steps. It's like, here's a project, there's a project, here's skill building things to do, but there's so many different aspects of drawing, from like gesture, form, perspective, right? Spatial awareness, like constructional drawing, where you're using shapes and drawing from reference, where you're just like capturing an image with your mind, but then deconstructing and reconstructing that image in three-dimensional space so that you can create things that don't already exist. And there's a lot of stuff into how to do this, like the FCD Feng Zhu School of Design. Feng Zhu is really, really cool. He's one of my favorite guys. Love Feng Zhu. And the constructional drawing thing and design, like I didn't know these things before I found Feng Zhu, and I was like 22 years old. And then like drawing and designing things my whole life, and like how he broke into it and explained constructional drawing. But then I've deconstructed constructional drawing in my own way, where it's like to take on like I don't know, is it Scott Robertson? Like Feng Zhu's teacher, the super illustration guy. You need like a high school ass education. And it's like setting up like this math grid, which is very much like not how my brain works best. So to take those like concepts and then to simplify them, and that like opens them up a little bit, where you have to be less technical and less analytical, and you get more gestural. Sorry, that's just a whole bunch of art talk. But there's all of these things, and there's a lot of courses where it's like you could buy this one person's course, but if you had a bunch of courses that you had access to already, then it's like you could kind of cherry pick and make that specified curriculum, where also at the end of the course, you have a completely different education than everyone next to you. They'd all have these like educations, interests, like specialties that are unique to them, and it'd make it more interesting working with a couple people. And it creates like networks of communication between them, where if we both like touched courses a little bit, but one person's 80% here and the other person's 80% here, and maybe it's like cartooning, right? And like creature design is like hard sci-fi, or like something, or like hard sci-fi and like comic book design, like action and momentum and stuff. And this is like design. If you had enough of each other's languages, then you could communicate and put together the skills that you have already. Like it would just link them up, because you'd have a shared basis of like language. Or if you were speaking only with like comic terms and them only in design terms, but if you knew enough about each other's things, where it just mesh really well, where I don't think it's at all more like generic education, whereas like these ones are both really specific, but you can keep that specificity and even add your own to it, where it's not just like how specific the course is, but also your interest and what you took from it, and like building your own style, like not just learning things, but also actively investing yourself in like combining them together in new ways and developing new techniques. I think about this stuff all of the time, especially when I'm like looking around. Again, when I was 22, I saw like Brandon Sanderson's course on sci-fi and fantasy storytelling. It was the only time I've ever seen someone ever put a college course online that I wanted to take. I was like, this dude's just dropping like $10,000 of like material here, or it would take me being there and I could like take that while I was doing other things. And I was learning about production, like how are films made, how are games made, how are comics made, what's the process, like how do these stories, these structures, these frameworks that create our creative ecosystem, like how they come about, how do they influence each other, like who does it in different ways when it comes to production, like where's the money come from, how do they build the skills that you need to get a job, what tiers of jobs are there, how do you collaborate, how do you work together with different artists and designers, and what are those steps? Like, if you have a script, it's made to be collaborative. None of the language is like the finished project, right? So it's a placeholder of a structure for a thing that's going to have a whole bunch added onto it. So like from that big ass blueprint that has all this space like written into it for other people to come in and innovate on that, to add their own touches onto it, where it's not like you want it to be your thing, because the grand vision and everyone putting their creativity and intelligence and imagination together is going to be so much greater. So you don't want to like try and think in terms of the finished thing, but to keep a space of like, and then we could have one of the best designers come in and do one of the best designs. So they have the craziest armor ever. And you can apply yourself to that design, like maybe it's white or red or something story specific, but you can leave like spaces. And I do this as well. Even though I do design, I'm like, I can imagine these designs that I do as if you had a master designer like also work it. So I like to get my hands into the clay and mold it myself when I'm making things, but you also want to think about like progression. Sometimes I think I might not do that enough. When I draw, if you can draw something like real basic and simple, it would be a better thing to give to a collaborator in some instances than if you like detailed the fuck out of it and made it this like already like finished thing, because then they'd have to like unfinish it before they could work their magic on it. So that's something that I think about too. Yeah, concept art, conceptual design. Yeah, education is something that like I'm a lover of learning, and even if I'm not taking a course, I feel like I should be taking courses all the time. At least something. Rhythm and structure has been the hardest thing to like work through, or that I haven't had like the last 5 years. And the last 5 years before that, there was a brief window where I had a really nice studio space. I got so much done. I got hooked on it. So then, like, when I moved into the next place and lived with my family, I can give you the entire timeline of events in my life and, like, what's happened to bring me here. You know, it's, like, wild and outlandish. It seems. I was just, like, right there on the ground level the whole time. You know, doing my things, working from where I was at, you know, which has been like a roller coaster at times. We don't have to talk about the roller coaster right now, but I will. You know, I'd be happy to. And it also helps to explain my perspective. But again, yeah, it's like so much has happened. So I do want to try and be as effective. I'm not being quite as effective as I could have been with time in this video. And already, I'm not going to let it like break my momentum. I already have. No, but I'm always trying to learn things, but it's hard without structure. Like I have a really ambitious schedule, but if my place is like a mess, and I don't have enough space for my things, so I'm fitting 2 rooms worth of stuff into 1 room. It's also my entertainment room and my sleeping space. People that design homes and stuff are like, you want to have your entertainment in one space, your resting room in one space, and your working room in another space, so that you can 100% transition. Doorways are a good time for transition. Starts a new train of thought instead of just going like one to the next, right? Where it's like cluttered. You know, you can go concisely from one area to the next with full power of focus. And then I know like the quality of my work could be like multiplied. Like there's multiplicative gains there. And as you build a positive momentum, that's a multiplicative gain too. If you're like, I'm on a roll, I'm excited to do the work that I'm doing. I've set it up, done the preparatory work to build my skills to the perfect level to take on this project, and I have the time and space uninterrupted. Oh my god. Now I've had to completely restructure myself for being interrupted all the time, because I moved my studio space back to my parents, and I was planning on only being there for a while. And it became so difficult to work. I was just sitting there like working in the back of my head all the time, and then I couldn't give like my little brother and sister like the full-time attention that they deserved. Or just like moving to really like stressful things in my house, like illegal things. Nothing like super bad, but it was also super bad at the same time. And it's like I can't be honest with where I'm at in my personal situation with any of the people that I'm trying to reach out to if I'm like I'm just super excited about these projects and everything's all good because I was like, I need to move my family to like a better place, a more like healthy space for these kids. Because that just meant the world to me. So it's like a thorn in my side. I'm trying to do all these things. My structure was really like shattered. Um, Hey, there were good times. I'm sorry. I don't mean to keep you. I don't need to keep you, and we can just talk about production and design, like taking on new projects, building a nice studio space, doing what I can to make this space better already. But like building a nice studio space with like also networks of collaboration where I wouldn't have to do everyone's jobs, but I could just have like the job that's most effective for me in a project, so I could like apply my maximum level of like value that I could give to that project. Like, here's some designs and a framework and such, you know. uh, and then, you know, I could move on to a different thing if there was other things I was doing that were like interesting. But it'd be a place where I could concisely like break it down, put all my focus on one thing for a time, build it to be as good as it can be, and like move forward, and also have time when I can fully rest, where I'm not like all the time I'm like, I need to get this money, I need to get these things together. So usually like I can rest for like 20 minutes. I'm watching a show, and then I'm like tapping my foot and like wanting to go back into work, or you know, just like giving up onto it and just playing video games for a while I like wait for a time when I can do it, you know, effectively, when I can apply myself to it. So you don't want to be like doing the work and having it be like that frustration. Not healthy to the creative project process, you know, creative processes. But this stuff's really good already. I've got enough like frameworks and things where I feel like I could give a lot of these ideas for things to someone else and have them continue to work it, continue to workshop it, add their own unique imagination and intelligence to the designs. See, this wasn't even what I was going to talk about at all. I was going to talk about like visionary mindset, you know, where the expectations and beliefs that you have about a thing like influence that thing and its size and scope, the potential, the like magnetic energy it has. Where if you like learn all about a thing and you've like learned all about the way that it is, you might fill up your entire mental space with the way that it is instead of thinking of ways that it could be. So you want it to at least be like 50-50. And you do want to have like an understanding of things, but if you're like, it's going to be really difficult, it's going to be like a lot of red tape because it has been in the past in all these ways. But if you look at like other things where people were able to radically shift up a whole like industry, a whole industry of power, like the radical expansions of some companies and like entrepreneurial ventures. There's like Elon Musk stuff is pretty cool. People were like, that's not effective, and like changed the world and held on to a vision that wasn't believed in at the time, but it was possible. We just had to like dream big and look to the future, which is always something that I admire. And like, I'm not saying like back every single thing that Elon Musk is about, but visionary mindset is something that is really important to have, you know, where you're like, what are ways that things can be done in new ways? Like if you're talking about education, you're like, if you went through the entire education system, but if you could start to prove that it was working and you use like crowdfunding to make at least supplementary, complementary elements that could prove this is a really good framework, this is a really good way of doing things to maximize our time and energy. And then it could be implemented on like larger scales, or getting like big private backing and the right people that could present it in the right way and like push for that vision. That'd be amazing. Hell yeah. No, I read about like the gradeless schools in Finland and having like you move fluidly up and through grades at your own pace. And there's like people of different ages just based on what their individual, like what is their level, what is going to keep them most interested, instead of like the one size fits all model. I remember being a kid in school, and if I had already figured out something, like I figured it out instantly. They're like, yeah, but then they had to explain it like 20 times over so everyone got it, and that wasn't always me. Sometimes I was the last guy, And I'd still be like, oh, the way she's explaining it just doesn't make sense to me. The way that she fits things together and that I do, like, aren't the same thing. Uh, so sometimes I'd learn really, really fast. Other times it'd be like, and I wouldn't be at that peak level of interest where I didn't like know what I was doing and could just like move through it. And other people you see where they're like streamlined, where their life and thought process and the way that they build things and have constructed their life and can pick things up, can put things down, can extract the most like value or intelligence from a thing, can use it effectively. And those like super prodigy kids that just like move up and through the system as it is. But people that think about things in different ways are valuable, are like really valuable, where there's like doing something really, really well, that other people already know how to do, where you're like an athlete or something, where you're refining your power and your drive and your abilities. And it's been really well documented and paved, you know? But other times you'd be like going through a jungle where someone hasn't been here before and you gotta move really like slowly because you're making new territory, but you could find a hidden temple ruins in the jungle. You know, you could run onto some Shangri-La type things if you find one new way to do something. If anyone can make even a single innovation in any way and have like the communication and language where you could like, okay, get that innovation out, like present it, get it to the world. That's a huge thing. That's a huge thing. Like one small thing that then can be like, you know, spread across the world is a huge thing. Which is always something that I was thinking of. If I'm like finding new ways to do things and building tools and techniques and putting tools and techniques together, which is something that I always do. Like find 3 different points of view and like find what you resonate with. There are 3 different forms of language of doing things. Like the art teacher Cynics has really cool shape design, like these blocky, bold, like really good cartoon style. And Ahmed has really good constructional style and power. Ahmed is amazing. Ahmed, so like building a map and a structure of the thing and like constructing a drawing by doing a lot of long form practice. You like know the forms really well. So if you just draw a line, you can imagine also the shape of a leg. So you're like building this map and like molding it in time. Yeah, I love drawing. I really love drawing, and not just drawing, but like imagining new things. Because I always feel like other people's potential gets me way more excited than my own. It's like why I do creative things, why I'm excited about the world was because there's so many things that were exciting to me. So many things that I have loved and that I do love, you know? And news stories that are coming out. Like I'm just a fan of like comics design stories, shows, movies, really like Japanese stuff, really like Japanese animation. In 2020, I got the chance to watch Neon Genesis Evangelion for the first time, and it was still 10 out of 10. Like it hit so hard where I'm thinking this thing is not dated at all. Like it was my favorite anime of the year. It came in with 10 out of 10 marks. And they were doing it on the most cost-effective animation ever, but they went so hard in terms of design and the power that they had. Oh my god. Yeah, Evangelion is one of the greatest creative accomplishments. It threw down such a huge gauntlet for Japanese media and design. Like everyone was like, how do you answer Evangelion? How do you speak to Evangelion? Because they like top the whole game, but then they break it open into this crazy wide space by the end. No, I don't think it ended right. I mean, and then they came back, you know, like Anno got like, you know, the death threats and everything. And I felt like Evangelion, the movie, was kind of a revenge. It's so hard. But yeah, it doesn't end with any conclusions though. So it's kind of like burst into a more continued story. Where in stuff like Metal Gear Solid, they have like some like, what is the meaning of life? You know, what how do we move forward? You know, what's the answer? And some of it in Metal Gear 2 as well. There's like Evangelion design all over the Metal Gear Solid series. But even stuff like Fooly Cooly, Trigger Animation, Gurren Lagann, these are kind of kids shows, but they take the spirit. I mean, they're shows for anyone with an imagination. Uh, anyway, I could go on and on and on about Neon Genesis Evangelion. The design too, though. Some designs, I love a timeless design where you see the shape of those mecha suits, and they're so wild and angular and perfect. And you draw them in perspective, and doing dynamic movements. Still looks so good. And that was one where after watching the series, it was just like the creative landscape and coming up with new ideas to things. Everything felt like fresh again. Like the places you could go in storytelling and design, again, like lit up. And sometimes it feels like we're on like the threshold of a broad new frontier of storytelling. You know, and again, I like to say like the if you watch my other video, like the pillars of like our most popular series that everyone kind of goes to, but then there's like subgenres within all of those areas, right? That get wider. And then like if you're really interested in one thing, like all my favorite things, I'm like I'd be into there being 3 times as many of these things. Everyone feels that way. And like just putting money into these things effectively. There's so much money in the entertainment industry, but like how much is being used as effectively as possible to give creative resources and drive to our storytellers and make the best stories in new ways, right? Like it could be done much better, no doubt. And there's so much like even like private interest in the in industry, people with their own private islands and stuff that love media. And if you could find a way to like also network collaborations and to build a team and to like have a vision and to like shoot for it. There's so many people that have had dreams and visions that like, you know, the world wasn't there yet or wasn't ready for. And to believe in those things, and vote on those things, even before we can see them, right? Like if, I don't know, just today's publishing landscape is really cool. Crowdfunding of new stories and ideas. It's like you don't have to get the company to like, you don't have to fit within their what they're doing at all. You can connect directly with your audience. So you have like unlimited creative freedom and the ability to become like making money doing this craft as easier than ever before. So if we could also put into that like how to collaborate as good as possible and how to have educational resources as good as possible, then you can just multiply the potential of the whole industry. Sorry, I don't know what to do with my hands when I'm talking. And if I get excited, I'm like, that was always like a character trait for me. Like people be like, yo, you move your hands to say everything that you're saying. You also say with your hands. I'm like, a bold new move forward in design. And then to have like stories that could also help to do that, where you get like our storytellers together and you're making really, really, really cool stories that also help to put the power back in the hands of the next generation, of the new generation. Like we know that what you will do will even top this, you know, and we like the best thing that we can. But stories that also have that message in them as well, and it goes to both places, like, you know, all these characters and points of development and the young characters in there are probably going to be, you know, even stronger, even better, take the world in new directions. So it expands what's possible. But yeah, again, if you had, I wrote this earlier, if you had like the team that you respect and admire with that awesome story that you just read, and like here's how you draw figures using like those designs that you're so excited about, and then deconstructing them to a generic design that then you could rebuild your own character in your own way, or put new ideas into it and change things up to start experimenting, where here's how we did it, but also here's an open framework where you can do it in different ways. And we took that generic framework in these ways, right? But you could, you know, diverge. So, you're not just recreating the same thing, but how do you make your own stories? And that's cool. That's super cool. That's my dream. And for so many years, I was like, my friends were going to college, and I was just collecting all the free educational resources all the time from all kinds of different places, and being like, God damn it, I wish there was a course in this that just covered foundational knowledge. So you can have one thing, and then you can go to all these specific different places, like interviews with artists and designers. If you really understand the field, then everyone's perspective becomes super valid for what you're trying to do. And you can put together everything that you don't know with what you do know, like a big Sudoku puzzle. Like if they're just saying, this is how I did things, and you also saw their work and you also knew the industry, then you could gain more knowledge from what they're saying, or ideas. Ideas and knowledge. Like if that's their philosophy and that's how their work came out, and this is the industry, then like how did it affect and tie in? And I love that. But listen, I'm gonna go. This is again. I'll start talking about something. I'm just gonna talk about the visionary mindset for 1 minute. Where if you can reframe your expectations not to the past but to the future, which is sometimes an entirely different thing. If you're thinking like education and building a new world education would be really hard. It's like, well, what if we use the entirety of our technology, communication, and like systems and social structures, social networks, the things that are effective about them, which is like radically effective, the way that we can like communicate, share information, and fund new things, is like at an all-time peak. Like what's the best that we could do right now, with what we have. And then you can talk about things like eventually world conflict ending and the global military defense budget put into things like, for a minute, humanitarian aid, but then it wouldn't even be as much of a thing. Like ending world slavery, ending world hunger. I heard that on less than a quarter of the global military budget, you completely end world hunger on only organic farms. And I'm like, oh my God, what? Like, I mean, we could all still have the same relative amount of guns and just put them all down a little bit, still keeping 3/4 of the budget. No. Anyway, it'd be really fun to be able to work together on something and to start collaborating and to be learning. I always want to like surround myself with people that I want to learn from, but also to be able to set down the student's hat and just be friends with a person and like share space is also my favorite thing. Yeah. Every holiday season, I was like, give me some friends to play video games with. I'd be the dopest. Come on, God. I know you can do it. And that really is like where I kick back and get ideas to move forward from. And like playing video games and like also thinking how things work and how they could work in new ways. And who would that idea be exciting to? Who could you add to that equation? What elements? How did they react? What's interesting? And sometimes you can like while I'm just sitting there playing video games, I'll be like, God, that was a really good idea for a thing in a super hyper valuable industry like gaming. Where there's so many games, they make so much money, and you look at those games and you could be like, they could be so much better. There could be so many more interesting things going that still keeps the super high generic value that sends it to like a mass audience. Like what would they all like that would be interesting? There's a ton of fucking stuff you could do in each one. And the idea of like making games that are big ass money makers that you could use to fund games that were more like passion projects that elevate the medium and move it forward, right? Like Hideo Kojima games. So fucking cool. So fucking good. The amount of innovative things that they did in Death Stranding is bananas. It's out of this world. And let me talk about that in the next video. Let's do that. I hate like I'll be like, okay, I'm gonna sign off and just get on another tangent. I honestly sat here for like 12 hours being like, just send a video about something working. all these things. And be like, it was so painful. It was painful having like 10 things to do, and you want to do them all, and you're excited about all of them, and you know there's potential there. And then thinking like, if you do one, you close off other options, and you're like, but and then you know you can like if there's a divergence and you're like, I love both paths, like you can go to one, main that, and then come back to the other, or use one to transition. You could choose one over the other one and do this in like a positive space where it's like, if I'm not working with someone else, and I am working with someone else, like, you know, it's just following your own path and still having love and respect for all people, right? So to not feel bad. I've like had that at different points where I'm like, who do I want my art instructor to be? Just for like drawing and design. And I love like different people. I'm like, I love multi-classing and creating my own curriculum. But there's been times where I'm like, if I just fully invested and tried to get to like meet this person or do their course, and like, you know, I have such gains from that and could share such gains with that with the world. Yeah, no, I've been coming up with game designs for so long, and we'll continue this. Sorry. Yeah, I'm gonna film more video. I'm gonna get back on the thing of filming more videos because I'll make a couple, and I don't feel like I've ever really made videos where I'm like, it's terrible. Like, I believe in the things that I'm saying and spent enough time with them where it's like I can articulate myself fairly well, you know, or really well if I'm like specifically really super interested in something. And I've spent a lot of time where it's like, okay, if I've done like 100 hours or like thousands of hours of like research work, spending time with this thing, how do I communicate to that to someone in like a really short time, but in a way that isn't like too packed, where you still have the space and consideration of the other person, which is like the most important thing, you know? Okay, I'll finish some designs and get back to it. But also keep just like, if I have a nice rhythm and momentum where I'm like, anytime I get a good idea, I can just turn it into a video. But me talking about the idea, it usually leads into more things and putting in work so it's more concise and structured, or like exactly what I want to say, instead of being like 25 things that are all pretty cool. You can be like the 3 things that work best. You can send them to people to start creating networks of communication and collaboration. So you're like, your stuff's cool, we're interested in this, you know. And so you're like building this open source team, you know, this free forming team of radical designers and engineers and like storytellers, visionaries, people that are doing their own unique things to make the world a better place, a cooler place, a more fun happening place, things that lets you look at the world in a new way, in a new light, and you've gained some kind of empathy or consideration, and it's something that's resonate with you, and then it changes you and your whole outlook. And sometimes that's so expansive where it's like the gratitude in having your outlook expanded has added value and flavor to your life, you know? And you start thinking like, like, do you want to make this the best life possible, to build the best framework for yourself possible? All right, my niece is here. I'll pick all that stuff up later, or I'll just come in with a completely different video and go on a different piece, because my whole like area of interest, things I'd love to do, I wish I had 50 lifetimes right now. But so it's like, I want to be able to delegate with those ideas and think about things where it's like, how could I use that to create world good and use that to create more cool things in the world? Because all the coolest games and shows, media, comics. Hello, Eleni.
Hello.
Hey, hi, bub. Okay, hey, we'll play some games in a minute, okay? I'm just like finishing the thing. Making a video.
Okay.
And that's my niece, Eleni. Okay. Anyway, yeah, there's so much to do. Like, but damn, this season feels good. There's a light, fun energy. Like anything could happen. Maybe really, really good. There's so much potential in the world, you know, like this sleeping potential of the world that can be ignited in places through the fire of inspiration or passion or drive or whatever you call it, that gets people excited. And on that elevated level, can the whole world get inspired and excited about changing the world and creating the best world possible together. You know, the world alit with the flame of inspiration. And to hold that image, you know, and it's like everyone taking part in it in their own ways, you know, like a radical ripple effect of ideas, uh, like shows, games, stories, social systems, and people looking at new and elevated ways of doing things. Uh, yeah, I like to think of that. All right. Well, I'll talk to you later, my Diaz. Do you be really well, and peace and love.